What if I told you that the most inspiring story of overcoming, faith, and courage was told millennia ago but is still capable of transforming your life today? Joshua, the most epic Bible movie of 2025, is not just a cinematic portrait. It is a call, an invitation to dive into a journey where the impossible bows before obedience and where walls fall at the sound of cry of faith. Imagine a weary people wandering for 40 years in the desert, carrying promises that seem too far away. Now, led by a new commander, no longer Moses, but Joshua, they prepare to face giants, cross the Jordan River and conquer Canaan, the long-awaited one promised land. This is not just an ancient story. It is a living script of divine strategies, courageous choices, and supernatural rewards. The most surprising thing? The same principles that led the Hebrews to victory can be applied to your life today. Want to know how to cross your own deserts, face modern-day Jerichos, and see open doors where there are only walls? Then get ready. This journey is yours, too. And stay tuned. In this story, you will meet unforgettable characters like Caleb, the brave one Raven, and even a mysterious one commander of the Lord's army, whose presence changes everything. Every detail, every scene, brings spiritual secrets that few know, but that have the power to transform. Are you ready to find out what happens when ordinary people decide to trust God completely? Then buckle up your faith belt, because this is going to be an epic achievement. And take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because content that will transform your faith and your life doesn't stop here. For 40 long years, the people of Israel wandered through desert, carrying not only tents, but the hope of one day stepping foot on the long-awaited promised land. Every dawn, the manna fell as a reminder of divine fidelity, but also as proof that it was not yet time to enter into Canaan. Many grew old, others left, and the generation that had left Egypt was gone. New leadership was needed, with a new breath. And it is in this scenario that the story of Joshua begins to shine. With the death of Moses, the one who spoke with God face to face, the people found themselves faced with an unknown who would lead them now. The divine choice fell on Joshua, a faithful servant and quiet warrior who had walked alongside Moses for years. It was not a political promotion, but a heavenly choice. God looked into Joshua's heart and saw a leader molded in the fire of obedience. And then came the boldest calling of his life. When he was commissioned, Joshua heard words that echo to this day in the minds of those facing great challenges: be strong and courageous. 3 times, God repeats this order, as if he knows that fear can visit even the most prepared. The responsibility was enormous to cross the Jordan River, face Jericho, and lead the people to victory. But God does not deliver a mission without guaranteeing his presence. And with this certainty, Joshua stands up. Many might have doubted Joshua. After all, how could a man like Moses succeed? But God does not look for clones. He raises new profiles for new times. While Moses represented the law, Joshua will personify conquest, a man of action, of practical faith, of courage in the field. And soon, everyone would see that the promise was still alive. God was guiding every step, even when the landscape seemed only dust and stone. This new chapter in Israel's journey does not begin with sharp swords, but with divine command and a willing heart. Joshua did not have all the answers, but he did have something better: a word from God. And sometimes, that's all we need to take the first step. Now, the people are beginning to line up for what is to come: preparation for the greatest battle of their lives. Joshua knew that before the battle, it was necessary to strengthen the minds and hearts of the people. With God's firm promise that no enemy would stand before them, he instilled courage and hope. The secret? Unshakable faith combined with obedience. After all, conquering the promised land, it would not be just a question of strength, but of trust in the divine word, capable of moving mountains or even opening the Jordan River. In this scenario, the emblematic figure of Caleb, a man whose story is an example of faithfulness and perseverance. After 4 decades, his courage has not aged. On the contrary, his spirit has remained steadfast. Caleb was the kind of person who does not allow himself to be shaken by the past or circumstance. She believed in what God promised and was ready to act. His example is a reminder to all of us: keeping faith alive is vital in times of battle. To confirm the terrain ahead, Joshua sends spies to Jericho, a city surrounded by imposing walls. The mission was risky but essential. Knowing where to step and understanding the challenges was the first step to winning. And who would have thought that the key to this operation lay in a woman, the courageous Raven, who hides the spies and demonstrates surprising faith in the God of Israel. Rahab, despite her origins and obscure past, recognizes the power of that God who had led Israel through desert. Her action shows that faith does not choose profiles or stories. It touches the hearts of those who are open to believe. By protecting the spies, Rahab not only saved their lives, but also secures her own place in the history of redemption, proof that true faith can change destinies and transform lives. This preparation is not only strategic, it is spiritual. Joshua strengthens a people not with weapons, but with promises, with examples like Caleb and Rahab, and with the certainty that God is already ahead. The journey to conquest demands more than human plans. It demands total surrender. And this surrender begins now, with a willing heart and courage that goes far beyond the physical. The decisive moment arrives the people of Israel faced with Jordan River, which at this time was full and turbulent, ready to block progress towards promised land. The scenario seemed like an impossible obstacle, but God's presence was there to prove that He opens paths where no one sees a way out. The promise was fulfilled in a miraculous way, and the river opened up like a carpet spread out for the people to cross. At the front of the crossing, carrying the Ark of the Covenant, Joshua leads the people with the confidence of those who know that the God of Moses is still present. The Ark was not just a symbol, it was a physical guarantee of the divine presence among them. And as they set foot on the land on the other side of the river, the people feel for the first time the definitive end-off desert. There was no turning back, only the path ahead. The crossing was not only physical, but spiritual. The moment required faith, obedience, and courage. Each step taken on the dry Jordan bed represented the victory of confidence over fear. For those who have spent long years in desert, that meant a rebirth, the beginning of a new era under the leadership of Joshua and the protection of the commander of the Lord's army. The Jordan episode reminds us that often our barriers are greater in our minds than in reality. God acts to help us move forward, but it is up to us to take a decisive step, trust in His power, and move forward. It is like crossing your own personal Jordan River, leaving behind everything that limits us and launching ourselves into the promise He has prepared. With the people on the other side, firmly in the land that God promised, the mood is already one of expectation and challenge. The conquest is not automatic, but confidence is renewed. What was once a distant dream is beginning to become reality, and history is about to enter a new chapter. After crossing the Jordan River, Joshua knew it was time to prepare the people for a new phase. The first step was to order the circumcision of a new generation, a gesture that symbolized a renewal of the covenant with God. Those who were born in the desert needed to assume their identity as heirs of the promised land, leaving the past behind and embracing the future with renewed commitment. Soon after, they celebrated the Easter in Gilgal for the first time in the land of Canaan. This moment marked the transition between the time of pilgrimage and the time of possession. It was not only a celebration, but an act of faith recognizing that God had fulfilled His promises and that the people were now under a new blessing, protected and guided by Him. Upon arrival on land, the manna ceased falling from the sky, a clear sign that the people would now depend on the direct provision of the earth. They would begin to reap the fruits of the promised land, which also represented a lesson blessing comes with work and responsibility. It was no longer a time to wait, but to act with faith and courage. God also removed the shame of the past, that which accompanied slavery in Egypt. The people of Israel were no longer slaves, but a holy people set apart for a greater purpose. This sacred identity needed to be honored with obedience, faith, and dedication. Joshua reaffirmed the mission. The conquest was not just territorial, but spiritual. This new alliance meant that every step forward had to be taken with courage and respect. The past was behind us, and the journey to victory was just beginning. The people were no longer walking in the desert now. He was standing on sacred ground, where every decision would define his destiny. And it was time to understand that the promise can only be fulfilled in practice. Before advancing into battle, Joshua has a surprising encounter with a celestial being commander of the Lord's army. This encounter was not casual, but decisive for the divine strategy. Imagine the scene. Joshua, a human leader, comes face to face with the heavenly leadership, showing that the real war is not against flesh and blood, but spiritual. The heavenly being reveals that victory will not come to the power of weapons, but through total obedience to God's will. This message changes the focus of the fight. It is not about physical strength, but about trust, discipline, and following God's instructions, even if they seem strange or difficult. It is a call to humility and unwavering faith. The ground where the encounter took place, probably on the edge of the battlefield, becomes sacred, a place where heaven touches earth. Joshua realizes that he is facing something much greater than he imagined. God himself is on the front lines, guiding every step, protecting every soldier. This brings comfort and strength to the hearts of the people. This moment is an invitation for all of us to recognize in our daily battles, no matter how difficult they may seem, we are not alone. There's a heavenly commander ready to guide us, but who needs our complete surrender to act in our favor. It is an invitation to an act of faith, not a passive one. Understanding that obedience will be the key to victory, Joshua prepares to lead with wisdom and courage. He knows that it is not enough to have physical courage, but also spiritual courage, the kind that moves mountains, opens rivers, and tears down walls, as we will see in Jericho. Imagine the people's surprise when they received an unconventional strategy marching silently around Jericho. There were no shouts, no battering rams, just firm footsteps and a respectful silence. At first glance, it seemed too strange to be effective, but there was a divine touch, showing that spiritual warfare does not follow human rules. For 6 days, the people walked around the city once a day, obeying with discipline, even though they did not fully understand the purpose of their action. Their trust in God was what kept them steadfast. This unconditional obedience is a valuable lesson for anyone facing challenges. Sometimes you have to act in faith, even when logic seems to fail. On the 7th day, the order was even more impressive: 7 laps around the city, an increasing rhythm, preparing the hearts of the people for the decisive moment. This repetition brings to mind the importance of perseverance, not giving up when time seems long, but holding on, believing that victory is near. The silent march is also an invitation to reflect on how we often underestimate the power of silence and patient obedience. While the world screams and hustles, God calls us to walk firmly, calmly, and faithfully according to his plan, even if it seems mysterious. This divine strategy reminds us that success does not depend only on visible strength, but on the inner attitude of the heart. The real battle takes place in spirit, and what God demands is firm obedience, a courage that is not shaken by doubts or the opinions of others. On the 7th day, the people of Israel circled Jericho 7 times, their hearts pounding in anticipation. Then came the command to shout in victory, a collective shout of faith, confidence, and power. The energy of the people, united in one purpose, made the voice of God echo across the battlefield, showing that the supernatural was on their side. The moment the screams rang out, the walls of Jericho began to crumble in a completely supernatural way. It seemed like an epic film, with the impossible happening before our eyes, knocking down barriers that seemed insurmountable. This fall represented much more than a military victory. It was a fulfillment of a divine promise. The destruction of the walls opened the way for the people to enter and conquer Jericho. Each step into that city symbolized the possession of the promised land, the victory of faith over fear and obedience over doubt. Joshua led with a confident smile, knowing that the journey still had battles ahead, but that this milestone was fundamental. The fall of Jericho also teaches us that God's power can manifest itself in unexpected and spectacular ways. When we place our trust in him, even the impossible can be overcome. It is an invitation for you not to underestimate the invisible forces that work in your life when there is faith and obedience. And so, with hearts full of hope, the people prepare to continue moving forward, with the example of Jericho echoing in their minds. What else lies in store on this journey for the new leader Joshua and his people? Rahab, the courageous woman who hid the spies, receives the promise of salvation for herself and her family. Her faith in the God of Israel is what saved her, showing that divine mercy reaches those who surrender wholeheartedly. This reminds us that, regardless of the past, God always offers a second chance to those who believe. Being spared and integrated into the people of Israel is a clear sign that faith transforms lives and opens doors that were previously unimaginable. Rahab not only saves her life, but becomes part of sacred history, showing that God honors those who seek him sincerely, even in the midst of difficult circumstances. Her story is a practical lesson in how trusting in God can change the course of our lives. Rahab went from being a resident of Jericho, marked by the city and its culture, to becoming a member of the chosen people, a living proof of redemption and divine inclusion. This challenges us to look at others with hope and compassion. Furthermore, Rahab becomes an example for all of us of the power of active faith, the kind that not only believes, but acts, taking risks for justice and truth. It is a demonstration that, often, small acts of courage can trigger great changes. Finally, Rahab's story reinforces a message that God's mercy is available to all, and that true conquest of the Promised Land begins with a transformed heart. This lesson prepares us to reflect on what comes next in the journey of Joshua and Israel. So, what are you going to do with this powerful story of Joshua and the conquest of the Promised Land? Have you stopped to think about which walls in your life need to come down, those barriers that seem insurmountable? How about applying the same faith, courage, and obedience that Joshua and his people showed? Their journey teaches us that, with determination and trust in God, there is no challenge too great. How about starting to strengthen your faith today? It could be with a simple habit, like setting aside a few minutes a day to pray or read the Bible, especially the books of Joshua and Moses, to gain deeper inspiration. Or you could practice courage in small actions, facing your own personal Jerichos with the same determination. And if you want to follow more incredible stories and learn how to apply these teachings in your daily life, be sure to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. That way, you won't miss any news and will continue to grow spiritually with me. Now, the question remains, are you ready to take possession of your own promised land? Let's go together on this journey of faith and victory.